Now, following from the Corporate Threat Register, or CTR, provided, an analysis of the choices of the threat and the process behind producing the CTR will now be discussed. In relation to Uber Air, the threat that was chosen was the threat of Bell Aviation not being able to produce the technology and develop it to an acceptable level for a mass launch in 2023. This was chosen in light of numerous factors and sources that could realise this threat. Aviation expert Eric Adams has advised in numerous pieces in 2018 that there is a rich history in air taxi technology spanning well over a decade of failed attempts at what Uber Air is trying to achieve with its Elevate concept. The sources of the risk were determined following a review of the information surrounding the technology outside of what Uber had outlined in their white paper release in 2018. The sources of technology not advancing as Uber predicts, the project running out of funding, and a lack of pilots being able to effectively bring the technology to light were decided on. Adams goes on to say in a 2018 article that failures of companies past, and more specifically in the case of Dayjet, who ceased operations after 4 years after burning through the capital and were unable to secure more, ring alarm bells for this project. This bankrupted the company and led to the closure of the program. Further to this, CEO of Zip Aviation, Itai Shoshani, has said in 2018 that the technology required to bring the vision of Uber Air to light is simply not viable at this time. The battery power for the VTOLs to function as desired is not existent. This is further discussed by Dr. Matthew Marino, an aerospace engineer and co-leader of the Unmanned Aircraft Systems research team at RMIT. He has admitted that while VTOL and drone technology has improved in leaps and bounds over the years, the notion of an unmanned drone using a computer to operate, being artificial intelligence rather than human intelligence, if you will, is not new. However, it has only been trialled on a minuscule scale, and even that was in the realm of delivering food, drink, and medication. In order for the project to run safely and effectively, he advised that more research and development is certainly required in the area. As well as the technology not being fit for a 2023 launch date, the fact that Uber Air has said in the beginning pilots will be required brings about another issue. Bell Aviation will need to ensure there are pilots trained to use the technology. And this becomes a source of threat when one realises, as per an article written in 2019, posted in the Sydney Morning Herald, Australia is in the midst of a massive pilot crisis, with flights being cancelled and private charters being permanently grounded. It was for these reasons that these sources were chosen. The decision to average the evaluated risk in creating the risk profile came about from the varying likelihoods of each source of threat. This does well to take into account all sources of risk when evaluating the risk of the threat occurring. If the most severe risk was taken and extrapolated over the total evaluated risk, it can be argued that it may have provided an incorrect notion of the actual risk of the threat occurring. However, on the flip side, it can also be argued that this average risk method does not provide an accurate representation of the actual risk. Averaging the risk of the threat occurring can lead to an overall risk being hidden behind some of the less likely or less consequential outcomes, as discussed by Schleicher, Pesarana, and Zaffaroni in 2008. In the case of Uber Air, however, and the sources of risk that could realise the threat, a high-level risk evaluation was provided due to a majority share of the sources of threat being high risk. Now, in the white paper release in 2018, the goals of Uber were outlined, and they entail launching a full-scale air taxi service in 2023, with pricing comparable to the car-based ride-sharing service we know today. This has a direct correlation to the threat proposed in the CTR, as if this threat is realised, then this goal will simply not be attainable. The risk evaluation found a high level And this may not even be truly indicative of the consequences that could come from the fallout becoming a reality due to the average evaluated risk method being used. The main consequences of this threat fall under business risk and question whether a company will be able to be profitable and cover expenses. It is the risk of the business that could lead to the expected paying of losses and additional expenditure in the risk management process. JB Maverick discusses this in an article written in 2019 and advises that business risk is influenced by factors such as cost of goods, profit margins, competition, and overall level of service for this demand. If the threat for Uber Air is realised, the business will not even have the capacity or the chance to generate revenue for the losses following the fallout of the threat being realised, and this could lead to severe financial consequences. Now that concludes the analysis of the risk of Uber's concept for Elevate. Thank you for your time.